The comments they have. I'm sure they would have plenty.
I'm tired of ducks.
Yeah.
They were mad about it's okay.
We've got everything in place except we don't have the whole presentation. We've got one page which
So I shouldn't call it.
That's got it, it opened.
For the benefit of the public, we're making a minor update to our slideshow for this evening. Tori Parrish, the city architect, is working on that right now. When she's back down here with that entire presentation on her thumb drive, we'll get started. So everyone can be at ease until then. Just wanted to, I'm known for getting started right at 4:30 on the dot, and wanted to give you the reason why we're not going to be doing that.
This is what the house. What do you think of all the vacancies over in the church?
Yes.
Oh, sure.
So I got put on the section. And Holton contacted me. He said, I know what you do, I know what you do. So I can't put you on file.
Yes. We're gonna be fine. We're gonna be fine.
I can share this with you. It's no big deal. An organization. Tori, take your time. It's okay. Just let me know you're plugged in. They had an organizational consultant, church consultant, come in and talk to them about organizations. They identified some problems. And this is a reflection. Not like earth problems. Actually, I told them that. I said, where's our biggest challenge?
Yeah.
We needed a change in priorities. And there was some dysfunction.
Yeah, I've been caught crossways with that myself for years. Because I think it's really quite over.
But then you probably know the personalities.
When I first joined the church, Dola graduated from church and Dola wanted for me to be.
I've heard
She was just a. It was a joy working with the and thank God she was around. We tried to build that shop.
So that's going on. Tracy Daniel wants to be close to her children. There's nothing nefarious there. She wants to be close to her grandkids. So he's to be closer to family and to music. Since we're weird.
Yeah.
And he was not upset. He was just like, no, I'm really passionate. He had an opportunity to
All right, you are all.
I don't know what I did after that.
So, as they say,
I don't need it. I just like having it.
Did I steal your paper?
No.
we're not starting yet.
Sorry about that.
It's like line. Judge Wells from Canada. Well,
It's
wait.
close.
Dangerously close.
So I left the comment slide out. One of the projects had no staff comments. And things, that's helpful.
Oh, I see.
Sorry about that.
So
I was wondering why that one slide was so important.
That one, put
Like,
it back in, reset.
It's functional,
very good.
and you may start.
Okay, very good.
And we are live.
I'm going to call this evening's meeting to order. Welcome to the June 14th, 2023 BAR Large Meeting here in the Crawcheck Public Meeting Room at 2 George Street. My name is John Robinson. I'm the chairman of the BAR. I'll be presiding this evening. The other board members present with me tonight are Jay White, Luda Sobchuk, James Metters, Seton Brown. City staff present are Torrey Parrish and Lawrence Courtney. Applicants should know this, a refresher. Applicants, when the applicant appears to present, they may use the clicker, which I'm informed we have up here, if you want to advance your own slides, or you may ask Lawrence to do so on your behalf, which has been our customary way of handling it for the past few years. Applicants simply need to ask the staff to advance to whichever slide they wish to go to, or use the clicker. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name when speaking. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed to a YouTube channel on the City of Charleston's public meeting channel. And your presence here is your consent to be recorded. The order of the meeting with each presentation will be as follows. There will be an introduction and overview by Torrey for the benefit of the public and the members of the board. This is followed by the applicant's presentation, which has a 10-minute time limit unless extended by the chair. If the applicant wishes to extend, they just need to ask me. Usually we do that in 5 additional minute increments. That will be followed by any and all questions from board or staff at that time. Any and all presenters should clearly state their name and affiliation with any given project. The applicant should speak during this portion rather than later portions unless called upon. The applicant's presentation is followed by the public comment period. Written public comments have been disseminated to the board in advance of the meeting. They were due yesterday at noon in order to be considered. Again, they have been pushed out to us via email. Written comments will not be read into the record unless it's deemed necessary by the chair and at the request of one of the board members. Any member who is here in person who wishes to speak may approach the microphone, and you need to state your name and address for the record. These presentations or these comments from the public, we request to be limited to a 2-minute time period unless I extend it, which the applicant should request. The applicant should not respond to comments made during the public comment section. The public comment period is followed by city staff comments and recommendations. The applicant is then given the benefit of a response or clarification period of up to 5 minutes if they choose to use it. The applicant is certainly not required to use it, and brevity is encouraged. This is followed by a board discussion and a vote on any agenda item. At this point, the applicant's presentation has concluded. Public comment is closed. The applicant may, when acknowledged by the chair, clarify inaccurate information or answer further questions from the board or staff if called upon. If at the appropriate time, any board member may make a motion for action on a particular agenda item. The member making the motion should make sure that I've restated it correctly for the record. My board members are reminded that they should respond yea in favor or nay not in favor of any substantive motions after the first few that we're going to take up this evening. The results of any agenda item this evening are posted on the city website at charleston-sc.gov/BAR. Agenda item number 5, which is approval of the mock-up panel, has been withdrawn at this time and will not be heard tonight. There are no recusals, and we have no substitutes on the board for this evening. This is a friendly reminder, particularly to our public participants who are very welcome here, that the comments that they make should be limited to those things that are germane to the purview of this board. Comments related to parking, traffic, lot coverage, livability, noise ordinance, etc., are not the purview of this board and therefore should really not be in the record at our meetings. Final reminder to both applicants and any member of the public to silence cell phones or other potentially disruptive devices. And with that, we'll move to our first agenda item, which is approval of the minutes from our May 24th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? For the benefit of the public and the applicants, we have so the motion carries and the minutes of the May 24th meeting are approved. For the benefit of the public and some of the applicants who I see here tonight, I appreciate you coming to visit, but I don't know how necessary that was on some of these agenda items. On applications for extensions, 257 to 261 King Street, 1 through 11 conversation with colleague Jay White before the meeting was we'd like to amend the city ordinance so that this ministerial act doesn't even necessitate the use of this board, but we're going to move through those in summary fashion. So coming to the first one for 257 to 261 King Street. Tori?
All right, 257 to 261 King Street. This is not rated. The original building was 1902, 1944, and the other building was built between 1944 and 1945. This is in the old and historic district, and the applicant is requesting the second one-year extension of conceptual approval for the renovation of the rear facade to include new fenestration, rear entries, roof decks, and removal of an elevator tower. And this was originally granted on July 22nd, 2020.
Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak in opposition to this ministerial extension of time? Hearing none, can I hear a motion from the board?
Move for
Order. Mr. Brown, how do you vote on the motion for extension?
Yeah.
Mr. Metters?
yay.
Ms. Sobchak?
Yeah.
Mr. White? And myself, yea in favor. The extension is granted. Ashley Boulevard?
Similarly, application number 2, 1 through 11, Ashley Boulevard is requesting fourth one-year extension of conceptual approval for new construction of 4 single-family attached dwellings, requesting an additional half floor based on architectural merit and context. This one was originally granted on June 13th, 2018. The first one-year extension was granted on June 20th, 2020. And I'll just read the staff comment, but it's an automatic board approval based on who did that previous approval. In this case, it was the board. Vested rights, they get 2 years. When that expires, they can renew for up to 5 one-year increments. Fourth 1 year, and they'll have one 2024 that they can go after. This will take them to 2024.
Thank you for that, Tori. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak in opposition to this extension? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the extension? Mr. Metters, is there a second? Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
Yea in favor.
Ms. Sobchak?
Yay.
Mr. Metters?
Yay.
Mr. Brown?
Yea.
And myself, yea in favor. The extension is granted.
Similarly, application item number 3, 98 Wentworth Street, Grace Episcopal Church is requesting a first 1-year extension for final approval of the new construction of a 2-story addition to the existing church complex. This one was originally granted 2 years ago, June 9th, 2021, and this is also a vested rights, automatic approved. It's submitted in a timely manner, 1-year extension of vested rights. This one will expire June 9th, 2024.
Thank you, Mrs. Parrish, for that. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak in opposition to the extension for Grace Cathedral? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the extension? Is there a second? Okay. Mr. Brown, how do you vote on the extension?
Yea in favor.
Mr. Metters? Ms. Sobchak? Mr. White? And myself, yea in favor. Thank you. I see a number of members of the Grace Cathedral, Dr. Wright and Ms. Pelzer. I hope you don't feel that we've wasted your time. That's pretty. We'd like to handle those in summary fashion. Okay, this one may be similar. Agenda item number 4, 7 Cherry Street.
7 Cherry Street is a structure that is not rated, was constructed sorry, I don't want that on there, it's in the Old City District. The applicant is requesting find this existing structure.
Of the abandoned Burger
When you put it that way.
Hearing none, is there a motion for the board to approve this demolition?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Sobchak seconds. Mr. Brown, how do you vote on the demolition?
Yea in favor.
Mr. Metters? Ms. Sobchak?
Yeah.
Mr. White?
Yea in favor.
And myself, yea.
5 was deferred, so we're moving to application number 6. Agenda item number 6 is 155 Meeting Street. This one is new construction. We reviewed it once before. It is in Charleston Village. Height districts are 35, 6, and 7, and in the old and historic district. The applicant is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a mixed-use hotel development, requesting a 25-foot ground floor and an additional story based on architectural merit and context. And we have some context slides. The former Golden Eagle Basin site that will be demolished. Of it today. Callback Alley, that was very specifically something we talked about last time. We're ready for the applicant to present.
Good evening, my name is Steve Ramos. I'm an architect here in Charleston, and I'm with the design team from Morris Adjani Architects, Ms. Rosanna Russo Pavone, and Mr. Nicholas Musser. First order of business, if we could have 20 minutes.
Of course.
Thank you so much. We are here on behalf of our clients, Strategic Property Partners, and Brad Cook and Damien Persiga are here tonight. We had a feeling that there would be a couple new members here that weren't at the previous meeting, so I'm going to start with just a brief intro to kind of hit the high points of the previous design intent. And this project was deferred at the last meeting, but it was probably one of the better deferrals I've had before. I think it was very well received. And we were asked to address some issues on Hurlbeck Lane, which Rosanna and Nick are going to speak directly to. But let me just catch everybody up. Some of the basic design principles: we've broken the building into 3 separate masses. The smallest mass we refer to as the gatehouse. It's adjacent to the Meeting Street Inn. The 5-story mass on Meeting Street we refer to as the Grand Hotel. And then the larger mass in the back of the site we refer to as the Residential Hotel. And that's just a naming strategy to make it easier to talk about. But those masses have been crafted to respond to the context, both at Meeting Street and then pushing the larger parts of the building back. For example, the Residential Hotel is pushed back 100 feet from Meeting Street and 125 feet from King Street. Another key component of this design was a considerable amount of improvements at the ground level. We know that that's important in Charleston. And it's important for this project in particular, the amount of green space and hardscape around the perimeter of the building, as well as a series of cross-block connections, which I'll highlight on the site plan. Starting at Meeting Street, the Grand Hotel has been pushed back 5 feet to create a 15-foot sidewalk along Meeting Street. We felt it appropriate that there be a grand-sized sidewalk. Along Hurlbeck Lane, you all know as probably not your favorite street in Charleston. One of the reasons is because there is no sidewalk on the north side adjacent to our property. So this project will be pushed back a minimum of 10 feet along Hurlbeck Lane to create a sidewalk. And then tonight we're going to show you a revised design that pushes us back an additional 5 feet to create a 15-foot sidewalk along portions of Hurlbeck Lane. And then along the western property line, there is a new alley that we're creating at the backside of the King Street buildings. We're really excited about this alley. I think everybody in this room knows that Charleston has a rich tradition of urban alleys. We feel like this is going to be the next great one. And that alley will connect from Hurlbeck through our site. You'll have the ability to connect to Fulton Lane, which is there it is there. And then we're hopeful that that alley will continue all the way to Market Street. We don't own those properties, but it is the intent that we'll be able to work with those property owners to fully extend that alley to Market. And last but not least, there are through block connections as well. Starting from Meeting Street, you have the ability to, as a pedestrian, to move through the site and actually through the open lobby to that garden courtyard that you see at the center of this drawing, which then connects to a little galleria, which then connects to the western alley, and then you have Fulton Lane. So we're really interested in those cross-block connections. This is a rendering from the corner of Hurlbeck and Meeting. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about Hurlbeck, but largely the architecture that you saw last time is the same, with a series of improvements along Hurlbeck Lane. I think this slide best represents the massing strategy for the building, which again directly responds to the height and the massing of the structures along Meeting Street, with the taller building pushed back. We had a lot of slides about precedents in Charleston. Those are in the appendix of the set. We're not going to recap those today, but we feel like we are kind of hitting at a rich tradition of architecture in Charleston of vertical proportions, calm rhythmed buildings, high amounts of glass, We feel like that is still conveys in the current design, and even more so with some of the changes that have been made. This is a glimpse at the western alley, which has remained unchanged. This is that kind of covered galleria space that I mentioned. So this is the end of Fulton Lane. There'll be a fountain kind of on axis with that alley. And then the 8th floor, as you all know, at the last meeting, we requested an 8th floor based off of architectural merit and context. We're still asking for that today. We felt like it was important that that 8th floor be minimized and be pushed back from the perimeter. We also felt it was important to create exceptional architecture at the top of the building and add to the Charleston skyline. And so this 8th floor is largely the way it is at the previous meeting. And I think it got applause at the last meeting. I think multiple members said they thought it was didn't really have much of an impact, but it was nice architecture and that it was welcome. Glimpse at the material palette along Meeting Street. We'll have a combination of precast concrete and limestone. The larger mass of the building will be clad in brick. And then there is a lot of ornamental metal on the project, which at the suggestion of some of the board members, we have scaled back some of the balconies in this proposal, which you'll see when we look at the floor plans. Spent a lot of time at the last meeting talking about architectural merit and context. Just to briefly summarize, the definition as per the ordinance refers to exceptional architecture and urban design. I think the images that were put forth showed that, and the contributions at the ground level and the massing strategy is reflective of what we think is great urban design. And we have no doubt that the materials on this project will be of the highest quality. But probably most important is the contribution to the public realm, which occurs at the ground floor, which we've only, I think, increased as part of this submission, both at Meeting Street, Pearlbeck, and the Western Alley, as well as this ability to traverse the site. We feel like is a unique offering that this project will have. And last but not least, this is not part of the architectural merit definition, but as I said before, we felt like that 8th floor needed to be exceptional and have the best architecture and add to the skyline. So for all those reasons, we're still making that request tonight. We put all of the comments from the previous meeting, both staff and board, in our submission. I'm not going to read them, but I'll just say in general, it was suggested that we needed to make some tweaks to Pearlbeck Alley. So that is the facade that we revised for this submission. Meeting Street and the remaining sides really aren't changed, but Rosanna and Nick are now going to walk you through those changes.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be back in Charleston and be here with Steve and Nick tonight to present our design revision in response to the comments from last meeting. As MA architects, we really believe that design is an interactive process with the Board of Architecture. We internalize your constructive criticism. We went back and restudied, and we believe that today, actually, the project is in a better place. And today, me and Nick would like to walk you through the proposed design. And we start with this first exhibit. This is in response to the city staff comments about perhaps the design relying too much on vegetation. So we provide the image to the right, where we eliminate the vegetation. And we believe that we can still appreciate the research, the articulation, especially proportion, both for the Grand Hotel and the residential hotel, even without the planters. In the next slide, here we are looking at the bridge connecting the Grand Hotel with the residential hotel. There were comments about the column at the bridge and the fact that they were creating an asymmetrical condition at the two edges of the bridge. We actually went back and studied the bridge again, and we had a column which were non-structural but decorative, and we believe that this gentle barrel wall vault was adding like a moment of elegancy at the connecting bridge with the wood material that give a warm feeling at the passage to improve, of course, the pedestrian experience. The language of the bridge wants to recall the 8th floor conservatory with the glass and steel. This view is standing in Meeting Street looking Orbeck. Like Steve mentioned, Orbeck during last meeting was deeply analyzed. So we heard your concern about the massing on Orbeck. So we would like to share today with you some iterative design that we did. We have internally, we went through a process of design to try to understand what was the best response to your concern. The design that we propose tonight is study number 2, which is at the bottom left, but I quickly would like to run you through our design process. The first study that we ran is the image to the top right. In this first iterative design solution, we kept the height of the 2 bookends on Orbeck, but we further pushed back the central portion an additional 5 foot 6 inches from the face of the 2 bookends to give a more breathing space at the sidewalk, creating pockets of over 7 foot deep from the face of the 2 bookends. And alternatively, we did another study, which is study number 2 at the bottom left. We maintain the over 7 foot deep central portion because we thought it was a successful move as we were giving release to the street wall on a pedestrian bottom level experience. Additionally, we decided to reduce the height of the 2 bookends by 1 floor. Still reading the vertical expression of the 2 bookends on Orbeck. We ran a third study where we tried to reduce the height of the 2 bookends by 2 floors. In this case, creating a 2 floor setback. And now I would like to focus on the proposed design by enlarging this view. So for comparison, this is the previous design presented during the last meeting. And this slide instead is what we propose tonight. As you can see, we reduced the height of the 2 bookends by 1 floor, creating a setback, which is more common to see. This allowed to still having organic and nicely proportional vertical reading for the 2 bookends, very much expressed by the fact that we pushed the central portion over 7 feet from the face of the building. This, as you can see, gives us a massing that really breaks through, creating this alternate void and full, and nicely break the massing along the street. Further, we analyze and we run the same study, looking from another angle. The studies are in the same order, and we propose the design that is shown at the bottom left, study 2. And enlarging this view, this is the previous design that we showed during the previous meeting. And this is what we support tonight with the design that we would like to propose. This view is standing at Orbeck, and so is more focused on the pedestrian datum. And this view also kind of highlight the move that we did. Reducing 1 floor at the top of our back, you can see that we believe that the massing is less imposing. Also, by pushing the central portion of over 7 feet back, it opens up the lateral elevation of the bookends, creating graphic design and then the better vertical reading. So today on the street, there is no sidewalk. What the project put deep sidewalk for the property line, it becomes over 17 foot deep at the central portion, really giving support to the public space and enhancing. It is one of our main concepts for this project. Also, one detail, you notice that we removed the solid canopy and the planters, both to respond to the comments described before, not to rely too much on vegetation, but also the fabric, it gives more a soft look and feel. It creates the same iterative study are now shown by a different angle, standing King Street, looking on our back. Our proposed design is the image at the bottom left. And we can see how we believe the architecture is more composed and is more organically resolved. The top setback is even less visually impacted in respect to the image to the bottom right. The study also has been analyzed as a pure elevation, and maybe the elevation also suggested one more consideration. Looking the image to the bottom left, study number 2, which is our proposed design, you can notice how the subtle change in elevation, in height, between the Grand Hotel, the bridge, and the residential hotel actually create a naturally organic urban identity. Urban identity for each of the buildings very much more natural. Also to notice that the frontage of the two Orbeck bookend are less than 50% of actually the street front along Orbeck. This is another important item that the elevation returned to us. For all this point, we really proposed study number 2 at the bottom left. And now Nick will continue to describe the design revision.
Thank you, Rosanna and Steve. Again, my name is Nick Mustard, project manager and architect with SHB. I'm going to walk you around the site, looking at these composite images, looking at site photos, and our renderings composed in those views. On the left is the previous design. On the right, it's a very subtle change. There was a board comment suggesting that we look at the guardrail at level 8. We set that back 30 inches. I know it's very small in this view, but I think that's going to be an improvement to kind of the perimeter of the building, the corners of the building as it's seen from the street. Similarly, if you step back on Fulton Lane, you'll see some just minor adjustments at the kind of northwest corner of our massing. Similar to the south side of Horlbeck, where we step back to 7th floor, we've also done that on the north elevation. Street near Princess Lane, again, you see just that subtle shift of the 7th floor setback. It just minimizes how visible our building is from this vantage point. Moving on to Market Street, some of the adjustments to these interior courtyards and the balconies that were previously continuous balconies are now broken into separate segments, allowing a little bit more light to enter the building. Moving on to floor plans, comparing the previous and the current design, the focus here is really that setback on Horlbeck, as we described. It's going from the typical 10-foot sidewalk on Horlbeck up to over 17 feet, which is going to provide a lot of breathing room on Horlbeck. Moving up the building, again, you continue to see that setback as you move up the building from mezzanine, from level 2 as well. Minor adjustments to the north elevation. You'll see in plan and elevation. And level 3, you continue to see that setback, some adjustments at the north elevation. Level 4, same comments. On level 5, you start to see at the north and south courtyards within the residential hotel, these broken balcony sort of pods, as we're describing them, is similar to the expression on the west elevation. Moving up to floor 6, very similar. The provisions. Floor 7 is the same. And then when you get to floor 8, really the major change here is looking at the central portion of the conservatory. We've reduced the north-south dimension by 15 feet to give a little bit more breathing room when there's north and south sides for circulation and for design intent. That helps that massing. Same comments on the roof plan. And then walking around the elevations, no visible changes on Meeting Street from this view. Similarly on Horlbeck, you see the step back on floor 7. And go through these quickly. So looking at the current design on the Meeting Street, the cornice of the Grand Hotel has grown 10 inches to better relate to the bridge that you'll see on the south elevation. It's really the only change that you'll see here. Looking at the kind of secondary elevation, you see the little notch at the 7th floor step back. It's shown in all of the views. And then looking at the Horlbeck view, again, you see the Grand Hotel now rises up even subtly above the bridge. The bridge now is really just framed with that barrel vault, creating a more open condition at that point. The masonry bookends at the Residence Hotel or have that 7th floor step back, canvas awnings, and then the central portion of the Horlbeck set back again to really increase the breathing room on Horlbeck. Moving this elevation, you see some of the stepping of the facade at the 7th floor, and then also the north elevation. And then looking at the north elevation, you see some adjustments to the building massing at those residential wings. And also there was I believe there was some comments about the gatehouse openings. We really had too much glass close to the property line, so we're responding to some building permit concerns. We can kind of address that later if necessary. The rest of the elevations are interior elevations that I'll flip through quickly. We can jump back to that if necessary. The garden court, and I think here the garden court elevations, you can see those balcony pods that have been reduced from the previous sort of continuous balcony. The east-west building section is unchanged. And then when you look at the north-south section, again, we have a setback at Horlbeck, as well as the sort of reduced width of the conservatory, in this view. For conceptual BAR, as well as a waiver for the max 25-foot first floor height. And as well as the approval for the 8th floor through the architectural merit architectural compatibility. So we appreciate the process and the comments, the meetings with the staff and with the board last time, and with this resign project. Thank you.
Thank you. And before applicants have a seat, does the board have any questions for the applicant at this particular time?
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Patterson.
Page 30 was. So, Rosano or Nick, the height of the building on the north side of Horlbeck, what's the height of that building?
At a step back or where? Sorry.
The pink building that's
the
actually
pink
fronts
building.
on King, yeah, it's on the north side of Horlbeck. With this line of sight, how
Sure.
that lines up with the reduction of the floor.
It may be easier to see it in the south elevation. I don't know that the height of that cornice. It's a tall cornice. I don't know the height offhand.
And I don't mean on King Street itself, but down the side. Going down the side of the building. Well, what would be a
Sure.
way that we could look at that?
You can look at the south elevation. If that's
Okay.
helpful. Sure. Yeah, I don't have that dimension.
No.
63 maybe. No. And actually, I apologize. That's been cropped off to the left side. This elevation, it's very small. What is it? We call that as 3 stories. I don't have the height
It's
listed.
probably about 40 feet to the location.
Yeah.
40 feet and the estimated height with the removal of one floor, what would that elevation be?
88. Go back to the elevation just to make sure I'm not.
Follow on to that?
Yes. Thank you.
Other board questions at this time? Thank you to the applicant. We will now move to the public. Yes, sir.
Howdy. My name is Marshall McClure. I live at Four Prices Alley, which is 4 blocks south of the Disney Hotel. And I wanted to say that I strongly support the residential hotel. That's because the applicant has already been awarded a story lobby space. Art grants another story for the architectural merit. The city will essentially be permitting a 9-story building and a 6-story residential area, 6-story height district. The height is simply too much, such a large footprint, 300 foot on each side, as we've seen in the slide 66 and 74 that we've just been watching. In the last meeting, the applicants presenters were asked, they proposed the top floor would be open to the public. I question that. I'd like to see some clarification and assurances. Also, from the applicant on the top floor, that whether it be the 7th or 8th floor, that the bar didn't pop up there. And the 9th hill was near, opposite the nearby residences. I do support option 3, setbacks both on the 6th and 7th floors, along with recessing the parking lot along Colback. But they still haven't internalized the services entrance along that street. So it'll be essentially be service trucks unloading stuff, picking up trash, blocking the sidewalk, regardless if it's a proposed 10-foot sidewalk. Noisy building services and loading docks should be constructed in 7th floors on the west elevation on the Kingside Street, because I think it will look too dense and blocky facing the most important street in our city. Let's be honest, the height and scale of the mass shown clearly on slides 66 and 74 is simply out of proportion to the rest of the buildings south of Market. The applicant refers to the skyline, but in the historic Charleston district, tall buildings dwarfing surrounding structures. Our skyline is our iconic church steeples. While I applaud the architectural design and details, particularly of the 2 small buildings, breaking the mass on the residential hotel on both the south and west elevations is essential. But granting the 8th floor, in essence, a 9th floor, would be a tragic disservice to the nearby residents of the historic district and the bar's process and precedent. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Absolutely. Further members of the public? Ms. Minigan.
Good evening, Erin Minigan with Preservation Society of Charleston. First, we would like to thank the applicant for reaching out to us on this project. As previously stated, we do feel the proposal reflects a high-quality design, and the modifications made in response to board and staff comments present further improvements to the architecture. The grand hotel massing on Meeting Street is by far the most successful element of the building that effectively utilizes classically inspired details, authentic materials, and gracious glassy openings. Coralback Alley was clearly an area of concern at the last meeting, and we too are worried about cavernous effect and impacts to the pedestrian experience. We appreciate setting back the hyphen massing in 7th floor, but would encourage efforts to further modulate height massing to reduce impacts along this narrow corridor. Also, the fenestration pattern on the taller portion of the building currently feels cold and stark, mimicking the repetitive openings of the office building next door. We would recommend studying methods of softening the architectural language here to help it read as a residential structure. Finally, we fundamentally believe that an 8th floor is inappropriate for this location. This is a highly sensitive site, and its redevelopment will be incredibly consequential for the surrounding context. The proposed building comes within 18 feet of the rear of historic buildings that line King Street and rises to more than double their height. It will be highly visible from multiple vantage points as towering over the small-scale streetscapes. The context does not support height, which would have detrimental impacts on the prevailing character of the historic district. We were encouraged by board comments calling for reduction of the 8th floor at the last meeting, and at a minimum asked that the 8th floor be further reduced in height and footprint to address the board's comments to mitigate its visibility and impact on the context. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public commentary?
Good evening. Justin Schreller of the Historic Charleston Foundation. We feel the proposed design changes have moved in a positive direction following board and staff recommendations. However, we would like to see study 3 as the preferred option, which includes the recessed 6th and 7th stories along Holbeck Alley. We feel this design works best proportionally and has the most positive impact on minimizing the massing from King Street. And additionally, recessing the 4-story garage portion It's also a step in the right direction, but we continue to have significant concerns over the pedestrian mobility along Horvath. On slide 73 of the application, it references urban design principles and public realm improvements and through block connections, specifically highlighting Horvath Alley as one of those enhanced pedestrian thoroughfares. With the current design, there are loading docks located mid-block on Horvath Alley. Anytime trucks are parked in those locations, pedestrians will be forced to step into the street to go around the trucks. There's no sidewalk on the other side of the street, aside from an internal parking garage pathway, and no crosswalks for them to cross safely, even if they wish to do so. While this may seem like a traffic and livability concern, the current design and architecture of the building would actively force pedestrians into the street without a reasonable expectation of being able to traverse the alley without walking into traffic. This is a far cry from the urban design principles and public realm improvements cited in the presentation. We urge the board to take this issue seriously and to ensure that there are true public realm improvements for the safety of pedestrian traffic along Horvath Alley, and we ask that the loading and material handling facilities be moved internally. We recommend deferral of the application until study 3 is the preferred option for the 6th and 7th story, and that these true public realm improvements are incorporated along. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwebler. Other members of the public wishing to be heard on this item? Yes, sir.
I'm John McCullough. I live at 175 Market, and I just want to support the recommendations made by the 3 previous speakers, and then ask a couple of questions about height, scale, and mass. When I read the ordinance a while back, it looked like to me like when you try to decide that it's going to be the right height for the area, you don't simply look at the neighborhood in general or so forth. You look at the adjacent buildings and the building directly across the street. In more than one building, the building should be looked at separately. So I understand why we look at the buildings across the street on Meeting Street. I understand Horvath Alley, but I'm not understanding where is the elevation showing the relationship of this large building at the back of the site, which is now somewhere. Couldn't find the elevations of those buildings on King Street so that we could see the correlation of how that fits in terms of the relationship of that building. And the particular paragraph in your document, which projects submittal requirements, under the requirements, it says for new additions, provide streetscapes for those buildings adjacent to the site, and a streetscape across the street. So we've been discussing, because it seems to me that that is going to be the measure of how height, scale, and mass, how that large building fits in from the standpoint of the neighborhood. It's listed in the program here that it's under the Charleston Village, and of course Charleston Village is the other side of King Street. So we really are getting to the point like 195 Calhoun, where we're talking about is something looming over another neighborhood, not simply too large in its own right. The other question I have is, I don't understand on page 1 where you submit the required comments about because you're looking for an 8th floor. And I didn't understand why you couldn't put in the zoning requirement bar, because in your bar regulations, it said you should not have any approval until there's compliance with the zoning. And in this case, the accommodation zoning has not been submitted yet, apparently. And I don't understand why it's going in this order, because you can't really approve something until all zoning has been complied with. So those are my questions: the height of the building, height, scale, and mass, and the question about why can't we do the zoning first before we have the decision tonight on the bar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. Further members of the public wishing to be heard? Seeing none, city staff comments and recommendations.
Okay. For context and analysis, staff has continued to work with the applicant team for feedback on refinements to the design. In general, staff finds that the current proposal addresses previous board and staff concerns. Staff has agreed that several of the staff comments provided at the last review are intended to be incorporated into the preliminary design review submittal. These are still applicable, but are not being repeated in today's comments. For reference, these are previous staff comments 1, 2, 7B, 11, and 12. Also, staff has reviewed the massing studies for the building masses fronting Fallback Alley and find that either study number 2, a setback at the 7th floor only, or study number 3, a setback of both the 6th and 7th floors would respond to previous concerns. We think that both have advantages. We do think that architecturally, study number 2 is a cleaner and has more rationale to it related to the architecture of the building. As a reminder, if we need to go over the architectural merit criteria, it is in the packet. And then some staff conditions for approval. Number 1, continue to study the bridge element, especially how the members underneath which form the barrel vault coordinate with solid elements and fenestration occurring on the building at grade level. Continue to study how the bottom of the bridge element is articulated. Elevation on page 56 seems to show that the spanning elements could be shifted to make 4 full bays, which coordinate with building elements, and a half bay on each side of the bridge portion. And then this could be reflected with accommodations for the underground parking entry. And 2, applicant is strongly encouraged to work with neighboring property owners to the design and coordination of extending the proposed pedestrian alley to Market Street. Number 3, please describe the recesses on the north elevation of the gatehouse building on page 55. I believe we did hear a little bit about that already. And 4, the vertical post at the top railing would benefit from being visually heavier to have the railing appear less fence-like. This can be incorporated at preliminary along with other agreed upon items noted previously by staff. And then there was a lot of questions. I just wanted to see if there was anything else I wanted to touch on. I have the ordinance if we need to.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. One recommendation?
You're getting to it.
Okay. We're recommending conceptual approval for height, scale, mass, and general architectural direction with the waiver on the first floor height and extra floor for architectural merit and incorporating board comments and staff conditions.
Okay. Thank you, Tori.
Sorry.
The applicant has up to a 5-minute response period if they choose to use any or all of it, any response from the applicant at this time.
We'll be brief. Just starting with staff comments. We certainly don't take any objection. The bridge element will continue to be studied. We are trying to work out some of the alignment of kind of the arches and the pilasters. Comment number 2 about continuing the alley. We love that, and it's something we're certainly working towards. Comment number 3 about the recesses on the gatehouse. Nick mentioned that, well, we just had too much glass on that facade, but there's still a significant amount that will be seen from Meeting Street, whereas a lot of buildings don't have glass on their side elevations. And then studying the railings at the top, certainly something we will continue to do. Just mention a couple more things. The comment about coming here before zoning is a good comment. It is typical that hotels go to get their BZA special exception first. In instances where an applicant is requesting additional height, Mr. Batchelder, who operates the BZA, has requested that they come to the BAR first, so that when they go to the BZA, they're putting forth the design that has been approved by this board. So that is the reason for the switcheroo, if you will. Multiple folks mentioned the loading on Hurlback. It's something that we've worked diligently to minimize as much as possible. But as you can imagine, a building of this nature has certain servicing needs. And the fact that we've now pushed the service entrance back 17.5 feet from the curb, and that loading bay is deep enough where the trucks will go inside, I feel like we put a really good foot forth in terms of minimizing those impacts. I'd like Rosanna just to speak briefly about Hurlback. But in terms of height and mass, we didn't talk a lot about that today because we talked about it at length at the last meeting, and it was generally agreed upon by both staff and the board that the height and mass worked, and that the design we put forth was of a quality where the height could occur in this particular location. So we didn't really dwell on that. But we certainly understand that King Street it's one of our sacred streets in Charleston, and we feel like the setback and the minimization of the building is really going to have little or no consequence to King Street. In fact, those were words said by Mr. Bello at the last meeting. So just wanted to briefly mention that. When I go back to slide 31, just briefly.
Steve, what, I want to make sure I understood what you said correctly. In the last meeting, you're saying that height on hardback was not an issue?
No, the overall height of the building and the massing was not an issue, but reducing some massing on hurlback specifically, but not in terms of the overall scale of the building. In terms of the 8th floor, for example, did not seem to be an issue. Just briefly, the discussion about which option we're putting forward was on a, you talk about that really well.
So we really approached the design iterative process with really open mind. And we just really believe that for the study number 2 at the bottom left, the architecture is more organically resolved for a few reasons. Reducing one floor, the 2 bookends create a more typical condition of having just one floor at the top of setback. We still have majorly kind of an organic and nice vertical expression for the 2 bookends, rather than the option 3 to the right. We start to create a more horizontal reading, and the 2 bookends start to be a little lower and horizontal versus the number 2 are more like a silhouette on the vertical expression. And also very important, we really consider that the slight change in height between the Grand Hotel, the bridge, and the 2 bookends, it creates a very organic urban condition. And rather than having like a straight pattern as study 3 offer. Also the study 2, we really like the fact that we were researching like a classical order. As you notice, we go from Winkley, which is in theme with the classical research for those facades. As you can notice, the spacing of the brick piers and the horizontal spandrel are equal. And so also this kind of classic order, like almost a crescendo to the top of the building, we thought was successful. And so in general, we believe the study 2, our proposed design is architecturally more resolved.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Meadows, sure.
I want to ask you a question because I understand like this. So the study on Meeting Street, looking down, looking at those buildings on your right, on King Street, looking at down, seeing those buildings on your left. My way of thinking is I mean, more important than looking at that. And so I understand what you're saying from that viewpoint, but I'm trying to figure out how to piece that together with looking from Meeting Street, King Street.
Sure, we fully understand that. It's just for going to the slide that if we compare study 2, study 3, somehow, again, study 3, we feel that the bookends start to be lower on horizontal, and for some reason, the 2 floor setback start to be more predominant and less organic. In respect, if you look at study 2, almost the setback looks more intimate and more like less dominant. What you see more in study 2 is kind of vertical expression of the 2 bookends and the nice organic variety of an urban condition. And we were interested on keeping the vertical expression. Also, we know, and also here in this slide, we also like a lot how we push back the central portion and we reveal almost a little return of facade where you can really appreciate the crescendo and the very classical order going from windows to Juliet to recessed balcony. So we open it up a little bit of facade and you can see this kind of vertical expression marching along So those were the reasons that kind of drive us to consider that this solution was the most resolved. But we really approached the study with total open mind, and we truly believe this one was kind of better, better architecture.
Thank you. Thank you. Board discussion.
Well, I wasn't here for the first time this appeared, but the beauty of YouTube is that you can watch it at your leisure, which I did. I agree with the sort of flow of commentary from that meeting, and I think the conclusion to defer the project at that time was appropriate. I will say I'm very comfortable with this project. We've dealt with a lot of audacious heights before, but the massing of this building addresses that height very well. And if you step back and look at this thing, you got a physical model of it. It's very complex in massing and in plan, but yet somehow it reads very naturally on the street, which that's a very successfully played trick, and I think it improves not only Meeting Street, but it's going to improve Horlbeck too. And really, what's being proposed at Horlbeck right now, even with this option 2, is not that different from Queen Street and the relationship to the Mills House in terms of the proportion of the street and the height of the buildings, and in terms of the service access that has to happen, is going to happen somewhere. I think the attention to the pedestrian experience throughout this project is notable and laudable. I think the architectural direction of the project is really something beautiful. I think that as far as architectural merit is concerned, this is meritorious. This is exceptional as a work of architecture. I'm very comfortable with the additional height on the first floor and the presence of that 8-story conservatory. We do have very tall buildings tucked in very sensitive places, and they're almost invisible because they are so sensitive. And this is one of those occasions. So I'm in support of the project comments.
Thank you, Mr. White. Further board comments?
So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to revoice many of the comments that I made during the first meeting. Many of those would be dealt with at preliminary. And the difference for me, because I went and looked at Queen Street also, is just the basic difference is you got a sidewalk on both sides of Queen Street, and you got a sidewalk on one side here. That's it. And frankly, if one floor is taken off as seen here, if the second floor came off, it makes me feel more comfortable dealing with it from the King Street side. And I think that's my only comment.
Thank you, Mr. Metters. Other board comments?
I'll go. I think that the comment made that height was not a consideration in the last meeting or a concern is just categorically incorrect. And I know because I made a comment about it, and I know that members of the public did, both ones who spoke here tonight and those that were provided in written comment and submitted to the board prior to the meeting. And I think it's incredibly important for applicants to review what the public says in addition to what the folks up here say. The city is just as much theirs as it is ours. And King Street is a sacred street, not just of Charleston, but of the country. And we need to ensure and maintain and protect what we see as a natural treasure. I appreciate the work done to Horlbeck Alley. I do think that the King Street side needs restudy, and I don't think it's I still don't think that the height is appropriate for this parcel. It's in an incredibly sensitive area of the city, regardless of if it's visible from the streetscape. And when you're coming off the bridge and you look out over the city, you expect to see a certain sight line. This is going to disrupt that. Not sure if council was considering that when they filed the extra story. I don't think that we should be considering the extra story for architectural merit. I would be more comfortable with an increase in height on the Meeting Street side versus what you have on King, and just, it's just towering. I think at the last meeting too, it was requested that that the applicant bring in a model so that we can understand what the actual height and massing would look like. And it's not here today, and I think that for us to make a decision that is most informed, that we need that information as well.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Further board comments?
In general, I'm still really comfortable with this project because there's a lot of beautiful architecture, order, proportions, materials. I'm not sure King Street because King Street is very narrow, and when you will be standing on opposite side, how much you will see of when you have probably 50 some feet depth of the to get to this building wall. Again, visually, it doesn't bother me, but I understand the concerns of everybody. I agree with just about all the staff comments, obviously. The one thing about Holbrook and 2-story versus 1-story, I actually don't feel the crescendo there on the top, but because it's kind of chopped off, that doesn't matter what. So like Jane said, I probably will feel more comfortable with the continuing the line, even so that's not a because it's separated, so perspective like it will be more cohesive to me. The bridge, kind of have a lot of concerns about that, and besides what Tori was saying, but even the arch is so big, it seems like not supporting that mass of the units above. And yes, aligning it with everything, it's what is vertical below is very important. That's a architectural rule, so to say. I think, again, other improvements which were done here, the emphasis of the vegetation, the canopies, things like that, recessing the utilitarian part of the building. I'm trying to remember the Charleston Place, the loading of the Hazel Street is all. It's not. It is, and is it that you said the trucks can go under, so there will be no standing?
Yeah, so the loading dock is deep enough so that the truck can drive into it. And so they won't be hanging out on the sidewalk.
So that's improvement. Again, and the conservatory, I personally always liked it. It's one of the examples, again, of the good use of the top floor. It's not asking for the units, but it's asking for this common use, and the glazing is just going pretty much disappear there, but it's really nice design there.
Very good, Ms. Sochat. I would say the things that do not give me pause or concern are largely what Mr. White has said about the Meeting Street elevation, which I think is unambiguously successful. And I agree with this comment that it is, in my mind, excellent architecture. I don't have any heartburn about the waiver on the first level height. I think it's appropriate for a project of this scale. And I just think it's a very rich and nice and orderly facade. I think to the applicant's point, and as we've said and told many other applicants over time, I think it has the right elements of verticality that we don't always see with these projects. I, of course, was not here the first time. I think I would have had less concern about the vegetation issue, but I certainly appreciate the applicant clarifying that the building can stand on its own without those decorative elements, which too often we have seen are not successful because they're not maintained or they just can't be maintained. I actually share Mr. Brown's concern, not in that the applicant hasn't been forthright with us, but that there's almost an unknown related to that King Street facade. And I do think, to Ms. Sobchuk's point, what's really important is what it looks like from the street elevation, right? And it's hard to see that when you're looking at a 40-foot facade, historic facade on King, and then it's backed up and you see this building in the rear. I do think that that's important, and perhaps a model would have rectified the concern that you're talking about when you're looking at the whole skyline of Charleston. How does it fit in? Well, another building that kind of has that element here in Charleston is the Judicial Center, which is really wedged in. And only from looking from an adjacent tall building, or say for the top of the Wentworth Mansion, you get an impression of how big that building really is, or of course by looking at the aerial. So I appreciate that concern related to those internal facades in the residential hotel and how big it is when you're looking at it from a distance, and then also from streetscape. And I think that just because of the visuals, that's more of an unknown rather than being misled as to the scale of this thing by the applicant. It's just hard to get a read on. And Mr. Metter's questions repeatedly demonstrated that. That being said, I still think I'd give approval. I like the conservatory on top. I think there's a conversation that's probably somewhat outside the purview of this board related to the extra story and our friends over at the Board of Zoning Appeals on how we deal with that and what's an appropriate height for a building in Charleston in general instead of being on us.
But it's done all of time.
The other thing is, I don't think that the applicant should be punished for attempting to remediate a condition that has existed on Horrellbeck Alley since the 1970s and is really the response to, half of the problem is, of course, on the adjacent property owner to the south, as opposed to what the applicant is trying to ameliorate here with a complex site that does have to be serviced. They are trying to create above the right of way. They are creating somewhere between 10 and 17 feet of pedestrian access, which inherently has some compromises because of where it's located. So at a very high level and conceptual, I think I'm comfortable with this. The only thing being whether we should have a deferral, maybe to the very practical point that Mr. Brown had talked about having this either a model or some better feeling for what it feels like from the streetscape on this King Street elevation and Horrellbeck Alley elevation. I know that's very hard. Maybe you can't see it without a model. I don't know. And maybe I'm being overcautious, but that's just my thought.
I think we will see that.
Can I ask a clarification? I don't apologize, I don't remember a model.
Well, I was not here at the first presentation, so if there was discussion
If
of
it
the
was,
model.
we misheard it, but
I don't
certainly wasn't part
remember.
of the motion.
I don't remember that presentation.
And I'm not saying it was part of the
Maybe I
motion.
dreamed it too.
If
Was that-
Mr. Brown
Maybe I
says,
dreamed it as well.
So I just want to clarify that we did not knowingly not bring a model.
sure, and I said 2 or 3 times, I don't think it's.
That's why we provide all the renderings, because they are a realistic depiction of what you see.
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion. I'm a fan of this project. Because but I am a fan of this project. And I'll also recognize the significance of the project. And because I would like to have confidence that I do right now of the Horrellbeck corridor, especially looking from King Street, I'd like to make a motion to defer the project or restudy of the Horrellbeck side. to the extent that you could do a non-detailed mass of the Horlbeck and, well, whatever part of it you want to do, Steve. But non-specific, just blocks. Along with comments from the board and staff comments.
So your motion would be for deferral, incorporating board and staff comments, for request for restudy by the applicant on the Horlbeck Alley facade, and to produce a non-detailed massing model to give some context of the scale of the project. Is that a correct restatement?
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion? There's a second, so it's in proper order for a motion for deferral with the additional stipulations that I've stated. Mr. White, how do you vote?
Nay, not in favor.
Ms. Sobchak?
Nay.
Mr. Matters?
Yeah.
Mr. Brown?
Yea in favor.
And myself, yea in favor. So the motion for deferral with the additional condition passes. Thank you, and we look forward to working with the applicant to get this resolved. Agenda item number 7,
Is One Berry Street,
One Ferry Street.
the Charleston homes, and this one is new construction in Charleston Village. Lake District is 3, and we're in the old and historic district. The applicant is requesting preliminary approval for neutral project.
And who do we have for the applicant?
I'll be damned.
Right.
One second. Yeah, let Tori give some context slides.
Location to the west of the Jasper. Conditions. Thanks, we're ready.
Very good. Mr. Antonovich.
I'll jump in first.
Sure.
Dan Doyle with the Beachfront Company, 320 Broad Street. Thanks, members of the board, Mr. Chairman, staff, for your time this evening. I would request an additional 5 minutes. Hopefully we don't need it, but you never know. The last time we were before you was April 26th. We received conceptual approval. And at that time, we received some great comments that I think will make this a much better project at the end of the day. We heard and we acted on those comments. Joe Antunovich will go into those a little more in detail. A couple of specific ones related to the brick on the rear of the buildings, the rear facades. We didn't have brick previously. The submittal now incorporates brick, so brick on all 4 sides of the building, each of the buildings. Also, there was a specific comment related to the rooftop of the townhome buildings, the busyness and railings. We've eliminated all of that. We've actually incorporated outdoor space on the front of the buildings, which you'll see. Joe will go into that in more detail. But the only place we do have that still is on the apartment building facing the Jasper on Berry Street. So we think that was a very positive movement, and we appreciate that feedback. And then finally, there was a comment regarding what's referred to as a limb wall line. It came up in the TRC, and I do want to let you know we vetted that, and we are in compliance with the ordinance today. So that's where we're at. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Dole.
Thank you, Dan. Joe Antunovich with Antunovich Associates, with offices at 224 West Huron Street in Chicago. Although I must say, over the last 10 years, I've probably qualified for a residency here in Charleston. Am I close? Did you say, Mr. White, am I close?
No, not at all. We're full.
We did revise the mass model to indicate some of the points that Dan was making. We cleaned up the roofs of the 15 townhomes that we have
and had previously. And then the 8 apartment units in this 3-story building here. We've simplified the roof simply so that when you look out from the taller Jasper building here, you have an orderly composition on the roof. And so, really, I must say, I think just about every one of the suggestions you've made, we've incorporated into the design. I thank you. I've got a couple of other projects in Chicago if you'd like to come and criticize those. But you can actually hand that around and look at that. Thank you. I'm going to run ahead to the rendering. These are images that we prepared last time, and you can see here that we've improved upon. The last time we looked at these images, there were roof elements on the upper level. We've removed all of those. The townhomes all contain approximately a 18-inch high parapet wall at the very top, and you can see that we've incorporated in the face of the building some of the suggestions you've made. I think if you can glance through all the way between the buildings, you'll actually see the backside of the buildings in the Muse area where we previously had siding. We're happy to say that we have brick on both sides. So all of the buildings have brick all around all sides. Here, the building, this elevation, where we have the brick townhomes in the foreground. We have stucco at the base of the first floor. As we go up into the brick part of the building, we have stone sills and stone cornices. The windows are aluminum clad. And we have, previously we had other materials so that even where you see the upper cornice line, that will be GFRC, as will the elements that form the front porches, the columns, and the intermediate elements above the columns are all GFRC. We're really duplicating all of the materials that we have on the outside of the Jasper. So in fact, if you even wanted to see a mock-up of what we're proposing here, we've got a full-size mock-up right across the street at the Jasper in terms of materials. The materials are simplified, and the materials are practically the same as what we have across the street. We have brick steps that go up to the front door, composite wood doors, and then we have stucco also wrapped around the garden walls, the landscape garden walls that you see right along the sidewalk. I mentioned the aluminum windows and the aluminum railing that will be pre-painted above the entry element, and the GFRC upper cornice, and even the GFRC, those panels that you see, the decorative panels at the third floor will be GFRC. A little longer view along Broad Street as you come around the corner on Lockwood. And then on this elevation, we've made a little change here to make the terraces above the front entrance doors a little more usable so that people can actually step out on these particular terraces from the living rooms on the second floor. Sorry. Let's jump forward. That's my big thumb, sorry. So here you can see the front entry element is a little bit wider to accommodate those terraces on the second floor. We have a living room that spans all the way across that area there, and that shows a beautiful view out to the water. So the materials, as I explained before, and as shown on sample board here. We also have copper downspouts, real copper downspouts, and at the very top, the scuppers, collectors at the top are all copper also. And here are the materials, going from left to right along the bottom. You can see the brick, and then you can see the 3-coat stucco that we'll be using at the base of the building. And then right next to that is the stone that we will use for the sills and for the heads of the windows. We have a little bit of siding, I'm sorry to say, and disappoint you all, but on the upper penthouse where we have the apartment building, we have the elevator extending up the stairs. So we have a little bit of enclosure at the upper level of the apartment building. But you can see those are set back quite a ways. And we are proposing this siding that we show here on the sample board. We also show images of the GFRC that we've incorporated into the Jasper, and those will be repeated here as the front entry elements. And then wherever we have railings, those will be pre-finished aluminum railings. We show an image of the light fixture that will come at and over the front door, the entry doors for the townhomes and for the apartment building. And I think that's about it. I think I'm going to quickly go back and touch upon the landscape plan because we've made a couple of improvements there also. Okay. One of the suggestions, this was the previous plan, and here you see along Barry where we have the long apartment building. I think there was a suggestion from the board that we should try to include more landscaping at the bottom end of that would be the south end of the apartment building. And we have done that by adding a planter and planting 3 smaller trees along that south wall. We've also planted a specimen tree. I can't really. It's with this. It's oh, here it is. Right. So there's the planter along the south side of the apartment building, and then we've located a specimen tree right outside of the gate, so that we're trying to shield and making a landscape impact as we come into our covered courtyard. We tried to get more trees into that paved area, but by adding the planter and putting this larger tree out also goes along with the 5 trees that we have within the muse. And we think that we've addressed your comments by doing that. And these drawings here illustrate, this is a little larger shot, and this shows the Hanover paver that we would be using throughout this gray paver. And then the image above that shows the paving with the brick edging will be the material that we'll have for the sidewalk that will run along the park and front the townhomes that face over to the west side. And then I mentioned the stucco on all of the garden walls, the 3-coat stucco that will be applied to the concrete walls that surround the buildings. Just on the elevations here, you can see where we have the Barry elevation, where we have that one larger specimen tree right next to the ornamental gate that we have coming into the courtyard area. The previous drawing above is what we showed last time. And these are images showing the landscape around the building. Oops, sorry. Generous landscaping of trees that go with the landscape plan that you saw. These are some of the sections. These now go back to the elevations that are and renderings that are within the packet. We've drawn every elevation here and shown the difference between the previous above and what we propose below in painstaking detail, may I add. But you can see how the roofs of the townhomes are all cleared up. And the only roof elements that we have are the upper level of the apartment buildings, which do have a terrace area, a small terrace area accessible with stairs from either side, a small seating area there with a trellis above, which encloses mechanical area in the back. Other elevations around the buildings. And then these show very accurately the difference above, where we had the siding on either side of the mews, and now we have brick on those buildings above the wood doors that sit below. The floor plans remain as is from last time. Really, there's nothing different from the floor plans. And then our comments, going back to addressing comments made by staff. The comments really that were made by staff and the board in particular are summarized here. And the first one addresses the busyness on top of the roofs. We've gotten rid of all the busyness. The second one says whatever's up there, you paint black. It should be white or a lighter color. And then on top of the apartments, all of those areas up there will have a lighter color to be compatible with the rest of the building below on the apartment building. And then going further down, the next two comments address the backs of the buildings as they face the mews, and a desire by the board to have brick on all facades, and we've made that change. And then there was one other comment. It'd be too easy if we just said we'd agree with everything. So there was one comment about the bricks and the header above our windows. The comment was made, perhaps you should consider extending the headers and the sills out half a brick so that they would engage the brick a little bit better. We've made them flush. We've made both the heads and the sills of the windows flush with the jambs of the windows. That's a detail that we actually have used at the Jasper. So we'd like to be able to continue that one little bit more modern masonry detail over here so to help tie the two buildings together. So that's the one objection we've made to the staff comments here. I hope you'll bear with us on that one point. But with this presentation, we would respectfully request your permission to proceed to the next stage. We would like, if possible, given the fact that we have addressed all these comments, and in the appendix, you can see that we practically prepared working drawings on all of these elements, that we would proceed to the final for the BAR and be considered that the BAR final review be considered by staff. And with that, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Antunovich. And before you sit, Mr. Metters, I think, has a question.
Just one on page 10. We'll just be going between page 10 and page 12. I just want to make sure.
That's 10.
That's 10 and go to 12.
Is that the one? The landscape details.
Yeah, so page 10 and then to page 12.
And page 12?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure, because this shows several places, but Ms. John, are we missing something right here? If you go back to page 10, this little piece.
Sandra?
Oh.
What it looks like when you're looking in through the gate here, you've got this structure, and if you go back to page 12,
Yes, you'll,
It's close to the,
so there's nothing there. And that shows up several places in the plans. I just wasn't sure which.
your question was, I'm sorry, Mr. Dennis.
Like on page 10,
Okay,
bump out and this bump out. And if you go back to page 10, it looks like you have 1, 2, 3 bump outs. So that we're missing something. It just shows itself. That was the easy place to look at.
just
but
the
it
wall
shows
of the
itself.
last apartment or whatever it is.
yes, it's actually, I must commend you on your ability to read the drawings. Yes, we've left out that third bump out, that very last apartment building, or the very last condominium building. In fact, it's on the drawings, but you know, it's so light,
I guess as soon as it will be built, right?
So
it just didn't print, it just didn't print at all, and I apologize for that. But that's all the way back, and the purpose of this sketch was obviously to show the front here. Well, it's really not on, it's not on that one, but I think on, if you look at page 26.
I saw it on some and not on some, so I was just trying to balance it with what we were doing.
Right. But if you,
Let me ask
if you go to
It is gonna-
28.
It is going to be built. It is going to be.
it's going to be, if you go to 28, please. 28 shows that it will be built. See, it's on 28. So this is now looking from the park back, and that's the townhome on the right-hand side. That's that townhome that we didn't draw half of it, but you can see the small gap between the two sets of townhomes. That's what we should have shown on that other drawing. I apologize for that.
That's okay. Right. Other questions of the applicant at this time from the board?
We did talk about the first floor on Berry Street, where the storages are. And I guess you mitigate it because it's a storage and you have all those windows. You're mitigating now that with the landscaping and
Yes.
planters and all that. So nothing other than that you are thinking about.
What
will be-
yes, you're referring to those. We had some storage lockers on the ground floor, but we are expressing the same kinds of windows that we have upstairs. We have roller shades on all of our windows. Those windows will also get roller shades, and I think I can promise you
Essentially
they'll
have
be
light.
down at all times.
Very good. Further questions from the board or staff at this time? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Tudor. Is there any member of the public who wishes to be heard on this agenda item? Seeing none, city staff comments or recommendations?
Okay. Regarding the incorporated staff conditions and board comments from the conceptual design review, siding has been eliminated from the muse elevations. Additionally, the rooftop elements have been minimized. Some have been omitted, making for a cleaner, more successful project. In general, with the exception of number 5, previous comments and concerns have been addressed. Staff comments. Number 1, programmatically, omitting some of the rooftop terraces resulted in enlarging the entry porticos and making the roof of these accessible. Staff is concerned about the potential for these portico roofs to be furnished and finds the previous smaller porticos and lower ornamental railings to be more successful to be more typical of townhomes of this style. Staff encourages a return to the previous iteration of smaller, simpler porticos. 2, if pre-finished aluminum railings are used over entry porticos, the pickets are to be welded with no exposed fasteners, tight in spacing, and the connections should be welded or hidden. 3, revise portico designs to maintain proper beam and column shaft alignment. This is visible on page A, 9.23, and a few following pages. 4, staff encourages additional detailing of the spandrel panels between the second and third floor windows. 5, including the park design is appreciated. Applicant to describe the proposed use of any similar lighting or furnishings into the parcel. And then I'm going to make up a number 6, that staff has not previewed the material board and samples, and we'd like to reserve the right to opine or interject in the next few minutes once we get to look at it. And last, I would like for you to consider what material orders could be freed up tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Tori. Any response from the applicant to staff comments? Board discussion.
No response.
Okay, I thought that's what I thought.
Wait, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
You said portico reflected with the penthouse? How?
Let's go to my first comment. My first comment. Okay. Let me get the clicker. I'm going a different way. Sorry. Okay, so this will show the elevation of it, but previously it was 2 columns and just a real shallow portico, and it had a lower ornamental railing. And this was a window, and I felt like that was more successful for this type of townhomes. So these have been deepened a little bit. In some cases, columns have been, it's now a 3-bay column arrangement, and some it's still just the 2 columns and the single bay. But the door has replaced the window and then a taller railing.
So you're talking about a roof of the portico or roof of
The portico.
penthouse?
Portico.
Okay.
Yeah, this would be accessible now. So I'm sure that there would be like HOA rulings about furnishings and
Okay,
that kind of thing.
I thought you
stylistically.
reflects, because you're talking about the roof. Okay,
And this is also the page with the.
no, I got it, I'm sorry. And one more, what else, what do you think?
Yeah, so that was a previous comment, I think, by
Right.
Mr. Metters last time, and
It's not
there is a
changed,
section through it, but it just doesn't have a lot of refinement to it. It hasn't been changed very much, and I think it's an opportunity to, it could just be simple as, it's 2 levels right now. There's no like ornamental molding to it. There it is right there.
So that's kind of what I'm saying, more details, so they kind of need to understand
Yeah.
what you're looking for.
I think, and I might not be, I'm not interpreting what you said, but I felt like your comment last time was very appropriate in that it's it's this and then some recessed panels. Maybe it has a little piece of cove profile around the middle or something like that. It's a high style building, so I felt like it could use just a little bit more.
It's most visible on Bear Street from that perspective on the corners. Okay.
Further board comments? I would just say, I think that the applicant has shown a high level of detail, even for preliminary, and I would say subject to board and staff comments. I would be fine with the staff having the final on this one, with the discretion regarding the materials that Ms. Parrish has expressed.
Mr. Chairman, can we ask her if she's okay with that? She might not want that responsibility on this case.
Are you okay with the final by staff on this one?
Yes, you're okay with that. Lawrence handles the final reviews in there. There's a lot to them.
Further board comments?
So I will interject if that's okay. On the material board, we the clapboard siding needs to be smooth and not the roofing finish. The stucco needs to be smoother, and we need window manufacturer information. cut sheets manufacturer, that kind of thing.
And the stucco is a plaster system.
Yes,
And not
three,
not an even system, it's a plaster.
no, we don't like that word.
Good, good. And you caught, I know Ms. is instructed, you caught the rest of Ms. Parrish's details on the copper and window manufacturer information.
Window specs.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think the comment about the lintel or header and the sill really important because lintel structurally spans from the sides, so now it's kind of hanging as a decoration. The sill is not necessary. Sill can be part of the opening, but the lintel, I don't know what Chicago does, but
May I speak? Or?
Sure.
It's a detail we've used successfully across the street, and it's something that we'd just like to use again.
I know because you still have kind of steel lintel or whatever inside, but
Well, I know it doesn't fit the full cyclopean nature of masonry as defined in our school books, but
well, it's the same as aligning the beam with the shaft of the column. It's the same issue. But anyway, it's in the comments, and I'm sure staff will be following up with that.
I was gonna say, I consider that's across the street at the main building, the Jasper. I'm aware that it doesn't have its functionality, but it does match and it got through approval there at the BAR at some point. But so Tori, with the caveats you added regarding the material palette that we just got on record here, that's satisfactory.
And
Okay.
brick patterns.
Brick patterns.
For
Right underneath the windows. I'm not
So
talking
the
about the
spandrel.
header brick
The spandrel.
seals. Yeah. I understand your kind of, you weren't actually talking about structural lintel, you were talking about the brick and they were gonna be flush. The brick and the seal were flush with the rest of the brick. Right? Got that. I literally was talking about the structural steel.
Right.
In that, and I think that's a separate item. Because I agree with you.
So we would want a ruling about the lintel.
Sure, sure, yeah. I agree.
Further board comments or a motion?
I'll introduce a motion. Preliminary approval. And well, let me pause for a second. I normally do think that when you're talking even in terms of masonry veneer, the lintel should be expressed as being engaged in the jambs. The sill, not so much. I think when we approved that at the Jasper, it was understanding that we were actually looking at precast concrete walls. And so I will start my motion over so it makes sense. Preliminary approval with staff comments and direction to extend the lintel at the windows and final review by staff.
So, Mr. White, your motion is for preliminary approval incorporating board and staff comments, directive to extend the lintel. Final, yes, Tori.
The question before you get a second. The staff comment about number one.
The terraces.
Is more of an encouragement to get board.
Well,
in.
the lawyer in me has to wonder if your well-founded concern, even though it's not the purview of this board, could be dealt with internally by the HOA.
Or it could be reviewed as a stylistic thing. But yes, I agree. I think you've got it, John.
I mean, I don't.
That's not going to be someone's.
You're not going to have Rubbermaid beach chairs out there.
Correct. I was trying to
not at these prices. Although that may be all you have left. I would say that it's pretty obvious that ditching the rooftop terrace was the result. I mean, this is the result of ditching the rooftop terrace, and I think in the balance, I think it's fine. So maybe I would amend my motion to exclude staff comment number 1.
Okay, so your motion is for preliminary approval, incorporating board staff comments except for comment number 1 from staff, and to expand the lintel. Final approval left to staff.
Already does that, that's right.
Is there a second? Ms. Sobchak, second, so it's in proper order. Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
Yeah, David.
Mr. Metters?
Yeah,
Ms. Sobchak? Mr. White? And myself getting in favor. Thank you to the applicant.
Thank you.
The lintel war.
Well,
appreciated you
well-
noting, and I do think it perhaps, certainly if we were dealing with college hours, or maybe even the doctor's hours,
Yeah.
we would have to be concerned about someone turning it into.
And this is more
There
traditional
seemed to be the knowledge
building.
that that was not there.
Just,
Right. Agenda item number 8, 19 Higgins Street. We have a quorum.
You can introduce, okay. Number 8 is 19 Haggard Street. This one is in the west side. It is, not the renovation work. District 85, 125, and then the Old City District. For context purposes, we have some images. And I would
Since,
like two
that's fine.
people.
I should have asked if we needed a
Let's see
reference.
James go.
Let's see, we'll get started in just a second.
and it's this. Hotel, and all that, 155 of cost. Yes.
Discount rate.
Something.
Yeah. You're like the little old lady in church trying to open a cough drop.
Of course. Economy pack of maps.
It might be a little aged.
Yeah, no, that's
Did you just find that right there?
I think it's ours. I think it's about snacks, right? Okay, it's from upstairs.
It's okay.
It's really all right.
It really is all right. All right. Look at that.
You gotta choke that down first.
Sorry.
It's okay.
She's
You
not
could have an
talking yet.
existing building?
Oh, she's not.
Right, we're ready for you now.
Thank you. Richard Ellison, Raven Architects, Atlanta, Georgia. So we are coming back for conceptual approval this evening. We saw you in early March. And for those who might be looking at this for the first time, I'll just briefly go through the site location, West Edge District, 19 Haygood, once office, it's a 10-story office building, once used by MUSC, informally known as the Hot Tower. I think it stands for Harvard Regional Tower. I think that's where it came from. But that's what we're calling it internally. That's the 19K bit officially. And it is here are some of our surrounding buildings in a urbanizing district. And it, again, is our existing, what we have to work with. Floor plans have not changed since March. The strategy we have going on internally is still working as a hotel, which fits pretty well in this particular office building. And in a branded hotel that requires a certain number of rooms, a certain size, a certain number of suites, and we've arrived at an arrangement that actually fits very, very nicely within that plan, nearly symmetrical, but it's one brand on one side. The building as it stands is rectangle in terms of its mass, except for the circulation cord that's been strapped onto the front of the building. That circulation cord is going to have to get removed and recut on the interior of the building to make this work well as a hotel. And that's reflected in these plans. And we had some homework to do. Before I go to that slide, I'm going to stop the site plan. We had some homework to do for March to meet with our neighbors with the West Edge Foundation. We had not had the opportunity to do that before our first presentation, but I'm happy to say we have been able to do that. And in the public comment section, I might want to do that later. I'm happy to say that we've worked out, we've been coordinating with our neighbor, and Michael Marr, representing the foundation, has written a very kind letter of support for the project, and is enthusiastic support. So I'm happy to say we've met that point. And most of his concerns were related to the entry drive and access and how people flow, cars, vehicles sort of flow through this area and continue on into the rest of the development. And the other point, one of our other points of homework was to talk about building lipstick, to talk about how we're improving this building. And lipstick is a term that came out. I know exactly what that means. I've used it myself. There's a lot of ways, there's a lot of kinds of lipstick you can put on an ugly building. And we'll probably all have different ideas of how we might go about doing it. The kind I like is the kind that a guest it actually adds value to the building in terms, I'm thinking in terms of my client, and taking a room and making it larger, taking a balcony and making it larger, adding glass, adding more glass, adding something that a guest would appreciate, not just a passerby on the street, but also a guest staying in the building. We looked at ideas that might add what we might call ornament to the building, but that those schemes felt a little shallow to me, and what felt stronger to me was to go farther in changing the shape of this building. And the strategy that we've been showing you is is carving balconies. My little pointer's not making the hand. That was pretty cool what you did, previous presenter. But I'll just describe it because I think you'll get it. A building that once had a flat facade, we're now carving 2 columns of balconies into. So that divides the building into 3 masses. And what we're proposing tonight, in addition to doing that move, we're talking about adding some slight extensions to certain rooms that create vertical forms that go the full height of the building. We're suggesting that we extend balconies on levels 6 through 9 to add more outdoor space to those guest rooms. And what that also does is it creates a base for the building, a middle to the building, and by stopping it before level 10, a top. So we have a kind of layered massing. It's a more sophisticated and a richer way of looking at the building massing. And this slide shows a little bit of my process. The image on the left, after playing around with a lot of different massing ideas, that was the one I felt was starting to feel right and more successful. That developed, as you see, going over to the right, to the design we're going to show you this evening. There was a staff comment that massing that we're starting
on level 6 through 9 might go down one more floor and feel a little bit better. We like that comment, we did it, and I think you'll see that in the renderings. But that's the primary big move that we're doing this tonight that we weren't doing in March. And so this shows, I think, pretty clearly the difference of what we showed in March and what we're showing tonight. And from a distance, it's actually a very similar concept. We still got the 2 columns of balconies for the shorter rooms at the center that divide what once was a single mass into 3. But then on top of that, we're layering these more subtle massing moves that extend balconies on certain levels that take the side of the guest room, that front corner that doesn't have any windows, instead of just treating that the same way from bottom to top, treating that differently on floors 5 through 9, and then repeating that on the other 4 corners, so you start to see that tracking around the building. So we've got lines that track around the building horizontally, and also lines that travel the building vertically. So it's a richer approach to building massing. Close up of it. We're focused a lot, of course, on levels 2 through 10. As we get into preliminary design, we're going to be talking a lot more about what happens at the streetscape and the lobby. We're still proposing that all the public space, the dining area, the check-in area, all that be on the southeast corner of the building as you come in off of Haygood. That strategy is still in place. But one of the things we're doing, I think you can see it in this massing, is by bringing out those 4 rooms on each floor and then also extending the parapet, we have a more, I would say, more complex and more interesting skyline. Because as we meet the sky, we've got now places where we're carving into the building and also where we're adding on. So we're really playing with that massing a lot more. And I think the word static was used, and I think what we're looking for is a little more excitement here, a little more fun, and something that's playing around with the massing more, and that was our response. Another, I should say, before we leave that slide, one of our other bits of homework was to make sure that the structural retrofit of this building, which there'll need to be some seismic lateral bracing added, probably, we think, because of the degree to which we're removing areas of the 2nd floor. I wanted to confirm that that was not going to impact anything that you approved in the meeting. And I'm happy to say that our structural engineer has reviewed this design and has assured us that it will not. That bracing can be done within this design, either internally to the floor plate or behind the areas that we've designated in the scheme. The approach to the front will be approach to the north side, very similar to the south side of the plan. The plan is almost symmetrical north to south. The neighboring parking deck is on a neighboring parcel where we're going to deal with that in a separate submittal. But I'll venture in this presentation to say we're going to have to do something to improve that deck. I can't stay in its current state, but what we're discussing this evening is the hotel tower itself. This aerial, I think, is useful to see us with our neighbors in context. The office building to the left, the West Edge Park building. Also, all 10-story buildings are roughly that height, same as us and our Holiday Inn neighbor down there. And I think it's going to be a handsome addition to the neighborhood. We have elevations where the materials we're proposing at this time for your interest is stucco and aluminum composite metal panels. We are limited in that this existing building currently has a stucco skin, and I've been advised by my engineers that don't put a skin on it that's heavier than the one that's on there. If you really want to try to limit what you're doing structurally. And so it's not that big of a limitation, but if you're looking at it, there's not precast or brick, we're trying to stay away from those kind of materials, which would significantly change our floor loading. So think stucco, which would be a Portland cement stucco, and these aluminum composite metal panels, which I think gives you a different texture, and I think as well with a modern approach like this. So we include the elevations, and I'll leave us on that slide. Thank you to the staff for your comments, and
we hope that this is the evening that we can push go on this renovation and improve what I think we all would agree is a building that needs improvement.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Public comment on this. Hearing none. City staff comments or recommendations?
The desire to eliminate, I'm sorry, wrong project. Number one, the proposed materials are improved from the previous submittal, and the design is more dynamic, but the organization of the architectural language should be clear. The rationale for some of the moves should be clear. So some suggestions are to continue the banding at the bottom of the 5th floor and the top of the 9th floor. This would give a more clear base, and it would incorporate the protruding balcony floors as well as the thicker panels between the windows at these locations. It would unify the elements. Another suggestion is the thicker applied portions underneath the windows would be better if they're flush with and connected to the darker gray corner treatment. Or another one, more of the treatments could be handled as elements which wrap edges and wrap more fully around the building. This could also unify the composition. Number two, the height of the two taller elements on the long sides could be lowered. 3, the grid at the French doors at the balcony recesses should be eliminated or be a more contemporary pattern to be consistent with the style of the building. And with that, we're recommending conceptual approval of heights en masse, general architectural direction incorporating staff conditions, and more comments.
Any response, Mr. Ellison?
Thank you.
Board discussion.
I agree with staff comments, and the one thing that jumped out about the new composition were those tower-like elements that seem to suggest stairs or elevators, but they don't seem to be related to program. And I get what you're saying about making modifications to the facade that improve the visitor's experience, improve the quality of space in the interior of the building. Those two items sort of betray that logic. But other than that, I agree with staff's comments and recommendations.
I think you have to consider where we're starting from. And I know exactly where the lipstick comment came from.
I think I remember.
March, but
No, I do.
I think that it is a very creative way of reworking the building, and I still have to commend the applicant for trying to improve this building, and I think that they have in fact responded to our comments at conceptual. And so I supported incorporating staff's comments. Further board comments?
I think it's, again, much improved even from the first submittal. The elements are more interesting, less static, more dynamics, using perimeter of ins and outs, it helps. But I'm totally agree with Jay and Tori about this. The towers like that, those are units, those are rooms. But usually they indicate some vertical circulation or something. So maybe they need to be looked at differently. Again, you're trying to break and create even more verticality with that and getting away from messing of the same old, and so there's more glazing there, which is nice, but popping out at the top is maybe need to be looked at. I don't know about the base, and I'm kind of comfortable with what is here and there because there's not a base for this. There's a different elements and different facades create the base for that particular view. So I'm comfortable with what is there.
Thank you, Ms. Subject. Further board comments?
Mr. Chairman, is there I just don't remember, is there like a site plan?
Yeah, the pool. Where's the pool?
I think it's combined with our first floor.
So I appreciate Michael's letter communication with him, but don't anticipate your plan substantively changing because of ingress egress. It looks like it's gonna be tight. That's with that road that's on the south side. Yeah, please, it's okay.
So we've got to make up an elevation difference because of the flood area that we're in. The lobby is actually higher than the ground around it. So and hotels work best when you can pull up and pretty much flush with the lobby level. And the strategy we're taking is to come into the site and then have a lay-by lane that will then travel up and back down and meet you coming back the other direction. So that's the 2 lanes you see there. You generally need 2 lanes to go by your front door, and you need an ingress and egress lane to continue straight. The last site plan that we showed that and viewed by our neighbor, I think we were swaying that entry drive a little far away from the building to make sure that we had lots of room for that lay-by lane. The preference by our neighbor was to be dead straight if possible, but just to continue straight on in. So one of the things we did working with them is to keep it as straight as can be. That's going to, we're going to have to play that out and make sure that it may take a wall, it may take a retaining wall between those 2 lanes to make up the elevation difference, as opposed to say a slope. But in urban area, it's probably something to be expected. And that, we think we've got enough length in that lay-by lane to make up the difference that we need to get to the front door. That's the general strategy.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm not trying to get into zoning
Thanks, good, great observation.
It's a road I use coming out of the parking garage after shopping. Right? I go straight down that road and turn on the Haygood. And it's hard when I'm looking at it each time I go by there to see how it's working without some modifications to what I'm seeing here. And I want to bring that up to the board just because we're saying height, scale, and mass here, but I think that there may be something that's got to overcome there. I might be wrong, but yeah, that's it. Thank you.
So I'm still asking about the pool, because there used to be a pool.
There was a pool previously. That's been omitted from the plan.
Okay.
Any comment on that? The existence or non-existence of a pool? I don't know that it's that germane, but.
If we have a pool, it will not be visible from public way.
You're good. Further board comments?
Municipal pool. I'll introduce a motion for conceptual approval with board and staff comments. I feel like this board comments were fairly consistent with those of staff.
So the motion is conceptual approval incorporating board and staff comments.
That's correct.
Is there a second? Luda? I just didn't know if that was a question or second. That's a second. Okay, very good. So the motion is in proper order. Mr. Brown, how do you vote on the motion? Mr. Metters?
Yay, not in favor.
Ms. Sobchak?
Yay, in favor.
Mr. White?
Yay in favor.
And myself, yay in favor. Thank you to the applicant. Look forward to seeing you in the next phase. Agenda item number 9, 93 Society Street.
All right, this one is a structure that is not rated. Districts 3 and 6 in the old and historic district. The applicant is requesting final approval for modifications to previously approved plans. Text for you. The blue right there, that's the building we'll be looking at. The other angle. All right, I'm Tara Romano with Romano Architecture Design Consulting for Neil Stevenson Architects on this project. So as Tori mentioned, the location of this project, and this is actually flipped north and south. So
The project actually encompasses 93 Society, an existing alley next to it, and then 284 King Street, and then these project together. So this is a previously approved project and it is under construction right now. The use is a boutique hotel, it has 20 rooms in this part of the project in the upper floors. There's an extra 5 rooms existing here that will be part of the project. There's a small restaurant that's integral to the hotel, and that's part of the 93 Society storefront that you see here. And then in this alley, we're creating a new courtyard entrance to the hotel. So essentially, we are shifting the entire entrance to this building to this courtyard alley. There's also a retail space on the King Street side that will function separately. So the request that we're here for today, this is the storefront here at 93 Society. And this will be the courtyard entrance right here. Landlord maps show through history the hyphen area and 93 284 came there. I'm going to go through the request real quick and then I'll skip back to the historic part. So existing building here, the focus is on the 93 Society part. Previously approved, we redesigned this facade, new cornice, and this is the new entrance to the courtyard area. And what we're requesting here is limited to the side of this opening. So instead of retaining this old storefront glass base, we're proposing to replace it with new glass and a new granite base. Similar to what was done in Darling Oyster Bar at 515 King Street, where there was an entrance here, and they renovated it to direct the entry to the hyphen area and got rid of the old entry. So the prior, this is a non-historic storefront glass that was renovated through the years. This is 1940s, 1950s storefront. It's been replaced several times. The transom no longer exists. As you can see, the door and glass heights were elevated at different portions. And then the current storefront was rebuilt in total in 2012. At that point, the glass was raised and the size of the opening was changed. The doors were pulled forward, and it created kind of a pretty steep ramp. It's a little bit precarious there. And this is the door that led to the stair. Part of this project involves stair over here, and so the stair is gone and no longer in use. So what we're requesting, because of the size, like the scale of the renovation and reconfiguring the entrance structure in the building, it leaves 3 doors, 1, 2, 3, that are unused now, and they're just proposed to be locked off. And our feeling is that because of the scale of the project, because it's a hotel, it's a long-term use, and this restaurant is a part of the hotel, like it's part of the lobby here, that with it being such an integral use, it's not going to be a tenant that will be constantly swapping itself out. And so we really would like to reduce the confusion and keep the entrance through the courtyard. Previous, and then again, just don't want to change your asking for here is limited to inside the scope. Previous up there. The material for proposing are wood trim details, layered look, and then at the bottom a honed granite base with some detailing at the columns, and then raised panel in honed granite at under each of these windows, and then a granite base along the bottom as well. This is the ground floor plan / site plan. So Society Street's at the top there. You can see in blue, this is the new entry through the courtyard. Door to the restaurant there, door to the hotel here. And then you can see that this small restaurant is part of the lobby area of the hotel. They're all kind of functioning in an integral piece. Back house here, and then this is that 2 and 4. Little work needed to up there. There's plan of that entry area, so the existing storefront has 1, 2, 3 doors that are closed off because there's no longer a stair here. So we're shifting, rebuilding what we used to call the death stair, because it's kind of like the Amsterdam stair. But we were able to expand it and move it into a base floor. And then this is the entrance here. And what we're proposing to do is straighten that storefront off, concentrate the entrance there. This is previously approved storefront and new.
Good, thank you. Any member of the public wishing to speak on this agenda item?
Mayor Minigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. First, we'd like to thank the applicant for reaching out to us on this project. We have closely followed this project, but are disappointed to see the latest modification. While built in recent years, the storefront still reflects the historic configuration, and its form is a character-defining feature of the building. Adaptive reuse is a strong tradition in Charleston, but historic and significant features should be preserved through the process to convey a building's evolution over time. The current proposal erases the traditional storefront design, which is a long-standing characteristic feature that should be retained. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Minigan. Any other member of the public wish to be heard on this item? Seeing none, city staff comments or recommendations?
The desire to eliminate an entry for functional purposes is understandable, and the marquee entry at the hyphen could provide a singular focused entry to the project. As a reminder, the marquee includes fluted glass with internal lighting. While atypical to have no entry into the main historic building, the existing storefront is not original. Precedent for this does exist, as pointed out by the applicant. 2 all signage will be reviewed separately for zoning requirements related to size and dimension. And then 1 staff condition we'd like to have is to provide a section through the panels as part of a final review by staff, final review of the 4 permit drawings, or a permit revision depending on the status of the project in the BAR review cycle. And then for that reason, we're recommending preliminary approval for modifications to previously approved storefront plans incorporating staff condition and board.
Any response, Ms. Ramon?
We just feel that the change to the storefront to reflect its current use and circulation patterns is warranted in this case, again, because it's not a historic storefront. The restaurant is integral to the hotel, and due to the scale of the renovation and the reconfiguration and reduces the confusion. It just makes, since it's such a long-term project, it makes sense.
Thank you for that response.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep, Mr. Meadows has a question.
Let me ask you a question, because I'm, while the storefront, like areas of my house have been worked on, the essence of that storefront and the way that the door, the sides angled in and the glass and the entry in the middle of that building, it is the way it was, right? Maybe different material or new material, but that's where the entrance was. Great. Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. I can't, it's hard for me to understand having a Darling Electric Bar as a precedent, because every time I walk by there, I feel like this is not right. And every time I go in the door to the left, I go, well, this isn't right either. And Tara's presentation was great, and it's right on. And everything that she's talking about doing makes logical sense. But we're supposed to be dealing with Board of Architectural issues, the outside of the building, not letting an interior program issue design what we're doing on the inside. I can't follow why we're doing that. I just want to say that you probably can tell, I think that the storefront should go back like it is, because the program of the inside shouldn't drive this outside. That's just my opinion. And by the way, I was a supporter of the hotel and everything else, but this last change, I can't see.
Well, I'll let Mr. Brown comment, but then I have a comment, because I remember when this came for us before, but I'll get there in a second. Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I guess that's, in relation to that question, I don't, even through the site plan, I don't understand what the virtue of it is if there's been no shifts on the inside to accommodate more seating. Does that make sense?
Well, our area is really good in the front area. Just, I guess, as we've gotten into construction, like, you can do 3 floors,
I mean, and I understand that as well. I mean, I get the logic of it, but you know, no one's stopping them putting a planter there so that it's blocked off. I defer to go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
My comment was going to be that I remember this board debated mightily, and the staff had many suggestions when we approved the first iteration of this project about how this hyphen and marquee entrance was going to go. And there was much debate about precedent for a marquee entrance, and there was much debate about how you were going to resolve this ambiguity about which entryway was the correct entryway. And so programmatically, the marquee, as I recall, and I stand to be corrected by staff, was kind of pushed out and made more prominent for the express purpose of saying to the pedestrian or the patron, hey, this is the entrance. That was kind of that's my recollection or summing up of the rationale that we used to justify having the marquee in that entrance in the first place.
I agree, Mr. Chairman. But I never considered that they would take out or change the design.
And again, I didn't either, so I thought that's why we gave the latitude that we did to do some interesting things with that marquee, because that's the problem we thought we were solving at the time, as presented to us. That's my recollection. I stand to be
that's
correct.
what I recall as well. And there are other storefronts not that far away that have at times been very confusing. I don't remember the address, but the building that once housed Fish, and then parcel 32, it's gone back and forth from having a door on the side back to the courtyard. You go up and you rattle the door. From a pragmatic point of view, I completely understand why you would want to just, that's not an original storefront, just this clear across. But we do, however, part of our charge is to respect the pattern of urban development in Charleston. And this may be one of those cases. I mean, a storefront from 2012 is probably the last thing that any of us thought we would be debating on this evening at BAR large. But it is respectful of the original pattern of commercial development in this part of the city. And, as you would never do this on purpose, but so much of Charleston is that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very practical problem we have, is we have this historic building. We know what the form of the entrance was, even though we all agree it has been, and Mr. Romano has explained, it has been modified many, many times. There's no real historic element to what's in that first floor facade, but nonetheless, in terms of original function of the building, that was the entrance. That was how it presented. That was how one entered it, and so this would be a departure. And I take Mr. Metter's comment about this being yes, there is a precedent or maybe a couple of precedents, but to Mr. Metter's point, maybe it's not a great precedent. I'll leave it at that. I'm very sympathetic to the applicant's practical problem with the internal configuration.
From some other point of view, you can view this opening glazing as a display window rather than, the entrance. The only thing I would say, I think the dividing on, 3 or whatever, 4 equal panes maybe need to be reworked and have some offsets of different sizes so it replicates a little bit more the historic proportions. Fenestrations but not necessarily recessed. Kind of that way. So it is dilemma, but yes, like I said, as often enough you go to and why is this door locked? And we do all the time kind of refurbish the history, I guess. So with pragmatism, and pragmatism doesn't going to make you happy, but it's pragmatism.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Before I do, I'd like to say this is the first time that I've heard Tara Romano Architects doing work for Mill Streets, and congratulations, that's great. That's great.
You need the first approval.
But I make a motion to deny this request.
There's a motion for denial of proposed modification. There's a second, Mr. Brown, so it's in proper order. Ms. Sobchak, how do you vote? Nay, not in favor of the motion, Mr. White?
Yay.
Yea in favor, Mr. Brown?
Yea in favor.
Mr. Metters? Yea in favor. And myself, nay, not in favor, despite my remarks, but nonetheless, the denial passes 3-2. Sorry. It's a tough one. And to be clear, I'm very sympathetic to the very practical problems inside this building. I just think we're hard pressed to build on a bad precedent.
Also,
Yes.
I wanted to introduce y'all to Travis. He's a member of our team we've had for about a year. He's been handling enforcement. He's the guy that got here, build enforcement. Do something with this. So we've been very happy to have him. He's actually gonna get some board experience by working with this board.
Great.
Which means he would be, if either Lawrence or I are out, he would be our backup. And so you may see more from him. He'll help with some of the pre-meeting stuff. And anyway, I wanted him to come for this meeting.
Absolutely.
Just kind of start meeting y'all, so.
Welcome, Travis.
Yeah.
My pleasure, Travis.
Take me.